Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome. So excited to have you join me for Coffee Chats with Coach Candy. Cheers, it's Tuesday. Hope you are having a great morning already, that you woke up fired up to take this day on. This is episode 37. Crazy, isn't it? Good morning, Elaine. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Deborah. Paul, before I forget, thank you so much for my card. I appreciate that. That was a sweet gesture for sure. So thank you. You made my day yesterday. I got that in the mail. Truly appreciate that. How's everybody doing this morning? It is Tuesday. Are you fired up? Are you having a good week so far? How are things going? Good morning, Martha. So how's everybody doing? Good morning. Oh, thank you. How's the week going so far? You feeling fired up? You feeling ready to take on a big week and step into your next level, step up bigger? Hopefully some amazing things are already happening for you this week. Today, I actually want to jump into a little conversation around legacy. And so I'm curious, as you hear the word legacy, what typically comes up for you? What do you think about when you hear the word legacy? How would you define that, and what does that mean for you before I jump into what I want to talk about today? So what do you think when you hear the word legacy? What does that mean? I'll give you all a minute to kind of get warmed up, get fired up, and I know we get a delay sometimes, so let me know. Legacy, I spent my time last night getting my calendar in order, bought, and I will use it. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so excited to hear that. Definitely want to hear what you think and how that process is going for you. How exciting. That is fantastic. Yeah, using that really, and actually your calendar plays a big part into what I want to talk about today, your legacy. So love that, love that. Martha, driving. All right. Old computer systems. Yeah, that is one definition of legacy for sure. And so sometimes, and there's something to that, right? We think about old traditions, old things that are handed down, right? Oftentimes we talk about generational legacies, or we talk about what that legacy is going to be when we leave. And so I'm curious, how many of you really think about, when you think about the word legacy, it's something that feels like, okay, it's old, it's traditional, it's something that you're going to hand down on your way out of this world. Because a lot of times that's what we get taught, especially when you talk, financial advisors, you talk to people who are, wealth advisors, or wealth attorneys, estate planners. They talk about legacy being sort of this thing you're going to leave when you exit this earth. And what I want to do is I want to disrupt that a little bit. I want to talk about how legacy is a living, breathing thing, and it happens in every moment that you show up. It happens in every moment that you interact and engage with another human being, and it happens when you're even stepping forward from yourself. And so I want you to think about this. I just saw this, and I love how things show up when I'm like, okay, this is the topic I want to talk about, and I happen to be getting myself kind of organized for the morning, and I just tripped across a passage by John Gordon, who I love. Those of you know he is actually was so wonderful to write a testimonial on my book. I met John several years ago. He has written like 27 international bestsellers. One of my favorite books that he's written is called The Seed. But he's also got books that he's more known for, such as The Carpenter, The Energy Bus, and he has a new book out called Training Camp. The leadership, and so it's a guide for leaders, right? And I love that he has a passage in there. Happy Tuesday. Good morning, Terry. Reputation, yes. So these are the things I want you to be thinking about. What shows up for you when you hear the word legacy? Because I want you to kind of think about it in the frames of leadership legacy and living legacy, which is this living, breathing, dynamic thing that's happening every moment of your life. And so this passage that's from Training Camp really just kind of was so synergistic for showing up this morning when I happened to open LinkedIn just to see as I was getting on, because sometimes I'm like, ooh, is there anything that's going to spark me for the conversation I want to have? Oh, awesome, Terry. Love hearing that. So here's what it says. You leave a legacy by living and working with a bigger purpose. You leave a legacy by making your life about more than just you. You leave a legacy by moving from success to significance. And then he talks about, I realized my success was for a bigger reason. I was given this platform not for me, but to better others. I knew I was meant for more. And so I want to talk about that, because we're going to get into a space where for some of you that either have been on the quest to look for what's your purpose, what's the meaning of life, how are you supposed to add value, I want to talk about this idea of living legacy or living leadership legacy, right? And there's another quote that I saw, and I love this quote by Ken Blanchard, who, if you don't know, is a significant leadership training and development guru who's been in the space for many, 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 many years. And he has a quote that says, "Whether you like it or not, you will leave a leadership legacy." And so I want you to think about that for a minute. Oftentimes we think, oh, I don't really think I'm creating any kind of effect. Good morning, Myra. I don't think anything I'm doing has value. And there is always a ripple effect. And so I know I've mentioned before one of my other favorite writers, Andy Andrews, who writes the book, The Butterfly Effect, which is all about how we don't even know that every choice we make creates a ripple out into the world. And when you start to realize that every thought, everything you say, every decision, every action you make creates a ripple effect from it. There's a domino effect always. And so the butterfly effect is this idea that when a butterfly flaps its wings, it creates an energy and movement that goes on for, generations and across countries, and it can create tsunamis and other things. It's just got this power, right? And so when you think about, you have that kind of potential power, you have that ability to show up. What happens though is oftentimes we don't take that personal responsibility for the fact that we are creating a living legacy every day, whether we think we are or not. We are creating a leadership legacy every day, whether we think we are or not. And so it is, when you stop thinking about legacy being this thing that's only on the way out, that it's the money we leave our family, or it's the possessions, or it's the estate, or it's whatever it is, it goes far beyond material possessions and material things and this lump one thing. Legacy is something that's happening in every moment that you're showing up. And so when you choose to show up purposely, when you choose to serve, you are creating a more intentional ripple that's going through the world. And so I would love to have some conversation around this, because this is not a concept that we teach often in schools, we teach in our families. We talk about legacy being this old, traditional, tired, something that is getting handed down to us by, say, our grandmother, or say our parents, or when we don't realize that we are creating a legacy every time we take breath. We are creating a legacy in every way we show up, and that includes when we cop out. And so there is this ripple, there's this domino effect, and I would really like to hear from you guys around this idea of living legacy, leadership legacy, and what that potentially means for you. Because one of the things that I want to start jumping into with you over the next couple weeks is I teach a concept that's called your what, why, and who. And it really is getting you into a place around your living legacy. It's a space of, what do you really want to create, affect, influence, impact, bring value to in this world, and why does that matter to you? And then who do you serve? And so what I want to do is help you get more clarity. And sometimes it's, I want to be this kind of parent because I want to know that my kids are showing up and able to contribute to society, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be these big, grandiose, going to change the world kind of things. It's more around you leveling up and saying, how do I want to show up and impact my family, impact my community, impact my day-to-day activities and engagement? And so I want you to think about this idea of a living legacy, which means it's got oxygen in it, it's dynamic, it's moving, it's ever growing and flowing. And what does that mean? So Terry, legacy, making an impact on the world that changes the trajectory of people's lives. I got this in the mail from the amazing Paul Russo, and it definitely impacts me and motivates me to keep going. Thanks, Paul. I love that. Paul, part of my ripple around the world are the cards I sent to people, like the ones you received. You talked about butterflies a week ago. Yes. And by the way, butterflies are my personal spirit animal, so I always love to talk about butterflies. And different colored butterflies have different, kind of spiritual meanings and things. And so fortunately, I live in Texas, so there's a lot of butterflies, and my favorite's yellow butterfly. That is absolutely my powerful spirit animal. And so there's this space, and I think part of it is because of that ripple that those butterfly wings create. And a small butterfly wing with the right motion can create massive massive impact. And so that's the idea of this butterfly effect. I mean, a butterfly is a really small, creature. And to think about the power of their wingspan, the power of what they do when they flutter and when that ripple is created, it doesn't matter the size. It matters whether or not you're putting the right intention and you're creating the ripple in the right spaces. And so I love this. Myra, yes, this is all we leave behind. Money and stuff are meaningless and false symbols of achievement. Impact is how we will be remembered. Yes, and so it's one of the reasons why even Paul talking about the calendar a minute ago, it's why I talk about focus management, not time management. Because time management is another one of those material things that we've created that says, oh, I'm going to watch the clock. It's just my time. It's just versus, no, I want to watch my impact. I want to watch the way I'm choosing to show up and influence for greater good. And everything we put out has a cause and effect relationship. That is a universal law. That is an absolute truth, that there is a cause and effect relationship for everything. And if you don't believe me, physics says for everything there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so even a chemical equation has to be balanced. And when you think about that, there's nothing in our world that can be put out without having a complementary action or consequence. And so it's why, and I'm going to bring in the 12 laws of karma on another day, but it's why understanding karma is not about, karma is just a bitch, which, hey, it can be. It's about how you show up. Karma is truly a way to embrace the idea of cause and effect. That ultimately is what karma is. It says for everything that we think, say, and do, there is a reaction, or there is a complementary other side of that equation. And so when you realize that, you get to decide what's the kind of karma, what's the kind of energy, what's the kind of legacy I want to be creating and surrounding myself with that I'm putting out in the world. Terry, try this, write your eulogy. I had to do that in a leadership class, and it was an amazing exercise to reveal the potential impact I have and the motivation to make it. Yes, and I would say that is an absolutely great exercise. Good morning, Robin. Let's see, it looks really cool, awesome. Daryl, good morning. Let's see, love it. I want to talk about how I get to use some. Oh, awesome. And so I want you to think about the idea of maybe write your eulogy. Think about that, because one of the things that we forget is there's this concept of a dash in our life. And so there's 2 points in our life that we all have that no matter what, they exist. And they're the 2 have-tos. One is we all have a birth date so that we could be on this journey to live this experience. So we have a birth date and we have an expiration or a death. It just is, because no one has figured out how to be immortal and circumvent that space of at some point we're going to expire, at some point we're going to die, at some point. And so there's these 2 points in our life. There is when we were born, and there's this space of when we exit this earth, when our human body is gone, right? And I can get into a whole other plane on spirituality, but I'm not going to do that today. And what I want you to realize is there's this dash in between those 2 points. And what's really shocking for a lot of people, and I do this as an opener for a lot of my events and my training, when we talk about living legacy, because this is a wake-up call. I want you to realize, and by the way, this number is going down. The average lifespan right now in the US is 79 years. I want you to think about that. 79. I want you to think about how old you are. 79 is the average lifespan. By the way, in countries like Okinawa, in Asian countries, even in European countries, Denmark, others, theirs is probably 10 years higher than ours in a lot of cases. So they're talking 89, 90. They have 10 more years of life because of the quality of life. One of the reasons our number is declining so much is because of the level of stress, anxiety, and fear in the US. And the fact that we are #1 in stress, anxiety, fear, and use of antidepressants in this country is disgusting. And that's the living legacy we're leaving right now. That's the fact that everything is the Desperate Housewives of, oh my God, poke my eye out with a stick. That's become our culture. And we've had this culture that's all around entitlement, this culture that's lacking taking personal responsibility. And when you think about that, that is a living legacy that we're creating for our children, for our communities, for our families, and for ourselves. And so we as individuals have an opportunity to step into that. And it amazes me how many people will say, yeah, well, that's not mine. I can't possibly make an impact. I'm just one person. It takes one person times another person times another person, because 1 + 1 = 20 when you start to create momentum. And the tipping point is not as far out as you think. And so when you can actually get people on board as early adopters and around a belief, and people that are really hungry and starved for something different, you step into a different space. So I want you to think about it. The average lifespan is 79 in our country. here's the reality of that. And I like to put it in the numbers that are like, you can really wrap your head around. So at 30 years old, if that's true, if the average lifespan is 79, so say that's, you know, somewhere around there is where you're going to, and I know my dad died at 62, not even, he was just before 62nd birthday. My uncle died before 65. Mind you, some of that was lifestyle choices and things that they were doing. And so I'm thinking, holy crap, right? I know what's in my family. I know some of the medical history, health history, whatever. At 30 years old, if the average lifespan is 79, you effectively have approximately 200 or 2,500 weeks left. I want you to realize that that's 2,500, 2,500 weeks, and that's at age 30. Now, if you're at age 40, I want you to realize that you're now down to 2,000 weeks. For each decade, you lose about 500 weeks of what's available to you to step forward and create this impact, to create a living legacy at 50. And by the way, I'm getting closer to the 50 mark. 1,500 weeks. I don't know about you guys, but when I think about 1,500 weeks, that feels like a fire that's being lit under my backside. That's like, holy crap, I am running out of time. There is so much I want to get accomplished. There's so much value I want to put into the world. And 1,500 weeks, I know how fast 1,500 goes, because at 60, you're down to 1,000 weeks. And so I want you to think about that. I want you to think about where you're at in your life. And I want you to think about this idea of, am I living my legacy full out in a way that is truly creating the maximum impact I can create? And so I want you to realize, again, back to Ken Blanchard's quote, whether you like it or not, you are leaving a leadership legacy. And so the thing is you can either half-ass and kind of let your legacy happen, or you can be really intentional and really mindful about the kind of legacy you want to create. And so it's one of those things that I think it's interesting when, you know, even Brene Brown talks about, right? Either you do vulnerability or vulnerability does you. It's the same kind of concept here. Either you do your living legacy, or guess what? Your living legacy is going to do you, and you're going to be remembered whether you like it or not for however you chose to show up. Or worse, you could be someone like my father, that when he passed, and this is one of the reasons why this fires me up so much. My father died just before his 62nd birthday. In fact, it was kind of an irony from the universe. He died the Friday before Father's Day, which I was like, really funny, universe, because I mean, we're talking about a man who truly didn't know what it was like to step into a role of a father. That being said, when my dad passed, his eulogy simply read, back to Terry's point, Carl J. Barone died on June 19th, 2010. He was the son of Carl and Catherine Barone. He had 3 kids at the end. That's it. There was nothing about, now mind you, I didn't have a relationship with my dad. I cut him out of my life 15 years prior to his death for many reasons. And it was astonishing to go out and read this eulogy that was not even facts. It was just this really sad space of, he was the son of these 2 people and he had 3 kids, which we weren't even named, and he's dead. And it was literally 2 lines, and it was pathetic and it was sad. And I mean, he comes from an Italian family, and so talk about family that usually is big on legacy and culture and handing things down. And he had been so ostracized from his own family that when he passed, his brother, my brother and sister and I went out to Philadelphia to do our grieving. We had no services. There was nothing on behalf of my dad, nobody. And my uncle took a bite of his pasta, twirled it on his fork, took a bite of pasta. He goes, what goes around comes around. And that was that. My dad's sister said, I lit a candle at the church. I did my job. And there was something about that hit me in my core. And so 2 years from that date, it's actually one of the things that was a catalyst for me moving into this space. 2 years, and it was after my uncle, who I was extremely close to, died just before his 65th birthday. And I was his caretaker for 11 days in the hospital while he was in ICU. He wouldn't even let the nurses clean him, so I got that lovely job. But I was his rock. And watching him transition to death, and literally transition to death, was such I can't even explain the experience. It was such a moment of, while it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, it was one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given in this life. But what happened was, I was really clean when my uncle died. It was one of those that I was so at peace. but I hit a rock bottom spot that I went into for about 6 months because I started to really process the fact that my father left this earth. And aside from, and I say aside from because he left a huge impact with me and my sister and my brother, and I think about how we show up, and I mean, it absolutely, my father was the gift for me to be who I am today. I look just like him. I have all of those personality traits. I've talked about it before. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum of how we choose to show up in that space. And I've had many defining moments in my life as it relates to how I evaluate myself against my father. But it was one of those that it ripped me wide open and it gutted me out when I was like, how can somebody be on this earth for almost 62 years and not create a ripple and not have anyone give a rat's ass that he passed? There was no ceremony. There was no one. I bet you there's people that didn't even know he died for years. And aside from his current wife, who that was a whole nother situation, nobody cared. Nobody felt a loss. There was no movement in the world because my father passed. And there was something that really fired in me about this idea of living legacy, about this idea around our responsibility for taking breath on this earth, for being brought into this world. And I love that there's a quote or a passage that talks about, you know what, God created the trees and the water and the mountains and felt that you had to be here, that you amidst all this other greatness, that you had to be on this earth at this point in the evolution of mankind and life and the way it is. And so that there's a responsibility in that. There's a moral obligation to show up and put our best foot forward. And so it was such a catalyst for me. It was such, people want to talk about my why. I am not just leaving a living legacy for myself. I'm leaving a living legacy on behalf of my entire family. And even my father who never experienced or knew, he was a narcissist to the core, never ever experienced what love was, couldn't love himself, couldn't love other people. And to know that someone existed that took breath on this earth for almost 62 years and never created that space to invite that into their life, for me, that just fires me up to say that I'm gonna live my life to leave a legacy on behalf of me and him and the rest of the cycles in my family, because there's a generational pattern. I've done constellation work and things in there, and there's this, like every other generation that has that kind of energy from my father, and I want to disrupt that. I want to leave a legacy on behalf of my entire family. And so that was one of the big triggers to have me move into this space to say, I'm destined for something more. There's a bigger message. And I want people to learn how to eradicate the current cycle of generational legacy, which is fear, anxiety, stress, debt, the things that we keep putting onto our children, the things that we keep pushing forward. And so I want to really be able to step forward. Good morning, Deanna. And I want to be in a place that says my legacy is going to have meaning. My legacy is going to have impact. And do I know who and what? No, because we're going to talk about that later. But I know that I have a responsibility to show up in the best way possible to create the kind of impact, the kind of influence, to create the change, to be a voice. That is the kind of living legacy that I take seriously. And so I want you to think about that, right? And I'm going to read the passage. And so I'm curious, your comments, your thoughts about this idea of living legacy. I hope I'm kind of stoking a little fire inside of you. You know, as I like to say, I like to light a fire under you so you can light a fire within you. Because this for me is a big part of my why. This for me is that space of we have a responsibility to stand in something that says we're taking responsibility for the living legacy, the leadership legacy that we're leaving. And again, as John Gordon wrote in the training camp, you leave a legacy by living and working with a bigger purpose. You leave a legacy by making your life about more than just you. You leave a legacy by moving from success to significance. And I want you to think about, what does that look like? What is that space of significance for you? How do you challenge yourself to stand in that space? What does that look like? And it goes to everything that we've been talking about. And I think about what, we've talked about from Brene Brown's work and the whole call to courage and different pieces. It requires you being vulnerable. It requires you getting your butt in the arena. It requires you to step out and stop worrying about what everybody else thinks and stop trying to be accepted and fit in and allow yourself to truly belong to who you are. And so I love that these pieces pieces. I'm currently using the Passion Planner. Awesome. I love that, Paul. A way to dial in Passion Planner is a great tool. And I want you to think about what does that look like for you? What is that space of moving into significance? And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be this, I'm going to change the world. It could be, I just want to show up in my family and my community this way. How can I be more deliberate in the conversations I'm having with my children? Because unfortunately, most people right now, even as especially as they're having conversations in their family, they're usually checked out, they're burnt out. They give the last of the stuff they've got in their tank to the people they love most. They are oftentimes making assumptions, judgments. We are crueler to the people that we care about. We're afraid to be vulnerable with them. There's just spaces that we're not stepping forward, and we're not stepping into that place of true significance. And it truly starts with conversations you're having in your own family, conversations you're having with yourself, conversations. Are you creating a space to connect and communicate, or are you spending every breath complaining and commiserating? And so I'm curious from all of you that are on this morning, what does that mean for you? What does it mean to step into your living legacy? What does it mean for you to take responsibility in your leadership legacy? And what does it mean to move from success based on our cultural metrics of what that means into a place of significance? So I'm curious. I'm going to give you guys a minute because I'd love to hear from you, because like I said, this charges me up. This is my space. And I want us to spend more time talking about how to be more deliberate and how to be more intentional in our legacy and what that actually means. Because I truly believe we have a responsibility, and I think people cop out far too much in this space. And so this is one of those that, you know, I'm gonna kind of keep digging into because I think we all have an opportunity. I think the fact that you show up every morning on these calls and engage in these discussions, like I've said before, what we're doing to create a ripple around the level of consciousness that's going on in this world, we have no idea the power of what these conversations are having. We are truly raising the vibration, and anyone that is in our path as a result of what we have engaged in these discussions is being benefited, because you are leading that out. You are sharing that. You are changing some of the way you think. You are taking a deeper level of responsibility. You are leveling up your game of significance. And so I'm curious, thoughts about that? What do you guys think? You're a little quiet this morning. So I'm going to give you just a minute, because like I said, I know sometimes there's a delay, and I just want to put that out there. I want you to think about that idea of living legacy, leadership legacy, the space of moving from success to significance. And it's funny because there's this space that I love that was an analogy, and I forget who was talking about it. There's a difference between being mindful, which means you're overloaded, you've got too much going on, and full being F-U-L-L, where your mind is just cluttered and full of stuff, and mindful, which is F-U-L, which is a space of being very deliberate about how you choose to show up and how you choose to serve. And so that is the opportunity, right? That's the space of when you recognize that it starts with you taking personal responsibility. It's about accountability. And, you know, I read something yesterday that was interesting that talks about accountability can't be delegated. And I was like, that's an interesting thought. And I actually just did it as one of my last comments in my calendar system that I put together. But it's very interesting that accountability is not something you can delegate. If it is something for you to own, you can't delegate that to anybody. Accountability is you stepping forward in your own responsibility and really being able to say, I take ownership of this. I get that I get to control my choice. I don't get to control the outcome or the consequence, and I'm going to be much more intentional about how I choose to show up. Myra, all of this, yes, I am trying to break my family history. Everyone wants to change the world. No one wants to change themselves. Amen. Screaming at the ones we love like we forgot that we were safe. Why are we so awful to family? I'm trying to break the cycle for both blood and non-blood families showing up. I absolutely love that, Myra, and it's very true. We tend to be absolutely just incredibly harmful, hateful, angry. We don't we're the least mindful with the people closest to us. And sometimes it's because we are half asleep, we're tapped out, we're burnt out, or we're in a space where we just assume that nothing's going to happen, that they're going to stay there, they're going to be around. And when you think about, that's the opportunity to truly step into a space to say, these are the people I care most about. When does it become about them? And when, again, going back to that living legacy, when? The question becomes, people are like, oh, at some point, I remember when I was in corporate, it blew my mind when leaders above me, one of my GMs said, he's like, well, when my kids are older, I'll spend time with them. And I looked at him and I said, when your kids are older, you're not going to get the opportunity because you weren't around when they were younger, that they're going to dismiss you, they're going to hate you, and they're not going to give you the opportunity to be around when they're older because you weren't around for them when it mattered most. And so you don't get a second chance at living life. Time is not something we get back, and people keep waiting. They keep saying, when this happens, then I'll finally do this. When this happens, and even when I transitioned out of my job, there was an older woman that I used to walk Peyton with in my neighborhood in Milwaukee. And when I told her I was transitioning, she started crying. And I said, oh my gosh, why are you, I didn't expect you to get so affected. I'm going to miss you too. She goes, no, she goes, I'm so proud of you. And I transitioned out of corporate just before my 40th birthday. I'll be 46 this year. And she started crying. She said, no, I'm so proud of you. She goes, my husband talked about his dream forever, about when he retired, when he did this, when he whatever. And she goes, he was so blessed to retire at 55 and he passed away the next year. She goes, he never got to live his dream. And I think about, we keep saying when. We keep saying someday, which someday is not on the calendar. And my question to you is when? What day? What time? When are you going to start to reclaim your life? When are you going to stand in a space to say that the sands in the hourglass are slipping away? And that I know if the average lifespan is 79, and I know in my family I have people that have died well before that. In fact, I don't know if I have a family member that's made it to 79. That starts to put massive things in perspective for me. Now, mind you, I am trying to work a deal with the universe that says I'm going to get to live to be 200, and Peyton's going to live there with me. I want to be the first person documented. Now, I don't know if the universe is on board with it, but I'm trying to work out a deal here because I have so much I want to do. And I also know the fact that time is slipping away in every moment. And I don't have an opportunity to say, not today. Today, I don't feel like it. When all this works and when this happens, because right now, if there's one person whose life I can effectively change, even this morning, to be very honest, I laid in bed for a minute and I was like, why am I doing these Facebook Lives every morning? How come I committed to this? Because this is starting to feel, man, this is something that I'm showing up every day. And then I thought, because if there's one person who can take something from this conversation that changes their life, that helps them lead differently, that helps them have a stronger space of significance, then shame on me if I think I get to stay in bed. And I'll tell you what, it propelled me out of bed, and here I am. And because there's not an opportunity, there isn't a second chance to live your life. Your life is living, whether you're engaged in it or not. It's happening. And so you can either live life or life's going to live you. And I really love that space that, Brene talks about. You're going to do vulnerability or vulnerability is going to do you. You're going to live your life or life's going to live you. So Carmen, let's see. Every morning I write down in my journal my intentions for the day. And when I feel like I'm getting off focus, I go back and read my intentions so that I can hold myself accountable for my daily goals, which ultimately leads to my weekly, monthly, yearly goals. Absolutely. Good morning, Charmaine. Daryl, I host family meetings twice a year with wife and children. We discuss everything, and there are no topics off limits. We discuss goals, parenting, legacy, family history, expectations, dreams, love, concerns, troubles, etc. No topics off limits, and everyone has a right to express themselves. I take minutes and send reminders throughout the year. Not sure girls get it, but it's powerful. God, I love that. Think about that, because right there is the place that we can start creating that living legacy. Right there is the space, and it starts in our own homes. It starts in the way we show up for the people that matter most to us. And the big thing I want you to think about as you're engaging in this conversation, as we're having this discussion this morning, is I want you to ask yourself, when? When are you going to start stepping into a place that significance is your gauge for success versus the metrics and the climbing this and whatever the money and whatever? It's the impact, it's the influence, it's the significance, it's the space that says, I know that whether I like it or not, I'm leaving a leadership legacy. I am leaving a legacy whether I like it or not. So therefore, I'm going to take personal responsibility and I'm going to step up And I'm going to be the best version of me as often as I possibly can. Now, is it to say that you're not going to falter, that you're not going to fail? No, because if you remember, go back to Call to Courage with Brene Brown. Being in the arena means you're going to fail. Being in the arena means you're going to get your ass handed to you. And it also means that you know that and you choose every day to be brave. You choose every day to show up. You choose every day to step into that space of that living legacy, that leadership legacy, and moving from success to significance. And so I'm trusting that maybe that little fire this morning, I want you to think about. So maybe take some time. Here's kind of my invitation or my challenge to you from this conversation. Because like I said, I want to dig into this conversation much more. This is just opening the dialogue around what living legacy is, the fact that you are creating a leadership legacy, whether you think you are or not. You are role modeling something for someone. I want you to spend some time, either do the activity that Terry mentioned, which is write your own eulogy. Write the eulogy of what you want people to say. And by the way, I'll just tell you, mine's really quick. I decided to distill mine down that simply says, Candy Barone. She was batshit crazy and badass, and she changed the world. That's it. That's all I need people to say, right? I was badass, I batshit crazy, and I changed the world. I impacted the world. I would love that. Short and sweet. And then we're going to rock out and have this great party, and I'm going to go up in a firecracker. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. And I want you to realize that what is it you want people to say? I mean, think about the fact that my dad left. He left just before his 62nd birthday, and nobody cared. There was nothing. There was no celebration. There was no space. The eulogy was about as dry and flat as it could be. And is that how you want people to remember you when you leave? If somebody were to say in this moment, and think about, it doesn't even have to be just your eulogy. Think about when you engage with somebody, what are the words? And we're going to get into things like your core values, your standards of integrity. We're going to get into a space that says, what is it you want people to experience when they engage and interact with you? And think about what some of those words would be. What do you want people to feel from you? What is it that you're giving? And so that's your opportunity. So your homework is to think about what is it you want to impact in the world. And so we're going to talk about kind of contributions and some things moving forward, and maybe I'll bring that in tomorrow into our imaginative space. But for today, I want you to think about what is it you want people to really think about when they engage with you, when they experience you. And when you leave this earth, what is it that you want your footprint to be? And so with that, I hope you all will start to really embrace this idea of living legacy, that it is a dynamic, living, breathing. It is in every moment that you show up for yourself and others, that everything you do has a cause and effect relationship, that there is this ripple, this beautiful butterfly effect that's happening, and you have an opportunity to step up purposely, passionately, and powerfully in that space. So as always, opportunity to say yes to yourself, know that leadership's a choice, and destroy the noise that's getting in the way. I love you all. Thank you again for always showing up full out on these calls. I will see you all tomorrow at 7:30 on Tuesday or Wednesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday. Holy cow. I will be back at 7:30 Central Time tomorrow morning for another Facebook Live coffee chat with Candy. Until then, I love you all. You guys are fantastic. You are so welcome, Martha. Have a great day, everyone.